All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. It's another edition of the Bullpen. Texas bats went cold, and the pitching folds late in Game 3 in a series loss to Oklahoma State. Over the weekend up in Stillwater, let's talk about it. Texas goes into Stillwater last weekend, 15 straight wins, lots of offensive production, lots of home runs, really good pitching up until that point. They win the opener against Oklahoma State 5-3. They had 10 hits in that game. Guillemette and Flores both had 2-run home runs. And then O'Dowd hit a single to score Brown for those 5 runs. So 4 of those 5 runs came via the home run. We've talked about it all year long. The offense really relies on the home run ball, and that can be good or bad. We saw the Texas team last year cruising. Well, they didn't really cruise into Omaha, but matter of fact, they had a really tough series out on the East Coast where they did just enough offensively to advance out of the Super Regional and make it to the College World Series. But the whole reason the 2022 team made it as far as they did was the offense. And then they got in the College World Series, and they couldn't hit home runs, and they couldn't manufacture runs, so they didn't score many runs, and they didn't win any games. So Texas wins that opener 5-3. Looks pretty good in that game. They go into Game 2 on Saturday, lose that one 4-1. They only had 4 hits in that game. They had 14 strikeouts in that game. The lone run came on a Dylan Campbell RBI triple. Jerron Watts Brown was the pitcher in that game for Oklahoma State, and he was absolutely outstanding. To me, I've talked a lot about LeBaron James and how good LeBaron James could be as a pitcher. He's got a really strong fastball. He's got wipeout breaking stuff. Just a really tough guy to hit if he's hitting his spots and has command of his pitches. Jerron Watts Brown was like everything I thought LBJ could be and more in that game on Saturday. I don't know if he pitches like that every time he's on the bump, but Saturday against Texas, if that wasn't a career game, then this dude's destined to be a Cy Young winner. He pitched 8 innings on 128 pitches. He had 12 strikeouts, only gave up 3 hits. He had Texas off balance the entire game. They didn't know what was coming. I think even when they knew what was coming, they couldn't do anything with it. They couldn't catch up to his fastball. He whiffed a lot of guys on his breaking stuff. Outstanding outing again. Jerron Watts Brown, that's a name. He's a transfer from somewhere in California, I think. I can't remember exactly where they said he transferred from. But that's a name to watch the rest of the season. I meant to go back and look up his stats, and I just didn't for the season. But again, if he's anywhere close to what he did against Texas last Saturday, generally speaking, he's a damn good pitcher, and he's gonna garner some Major League Baseball attention, I think. And then the nut punch of the weekend was the Game 3. Texas opens up that game with a 3-run blast by Guillemette, and then that's literally the only runs they scored. He hit a 3-run home run in the first inning, and then after that, they were only able to net 4 more hits. They struck out 12 times in that game. They had the bases loaded with no outs in the top of the 9th inning and couldn't play to run. Had a strikeout at the plate, and then we grounded into a double play to end the game. End the inning. Still got the lead at this point. Still up 3-2. All Morehouse, who's been really good all season. Morehouse has had wins. He's had saves. He's had multiple wins in the same series. He won 2 games against Texas Tech coming in out of the bullpen. Generally, really good stuff, really good command. Not like overpowering or anything, but certainly capable of coming in and protecting a 3-2 lead. He gives up 2 hits, 2 walks, throws a wild pitch, all in the bottom of the ninth to give Oklahoma State the walk-off victory. They tied it on a wild pitch and then base hit down the right field line, put it away. So that was a tough one. Texas certainly offensively didn't have huge command of this game, but they did have a 3-run lead well into the game. Oklahoma State started picking away at it a little bit towards the middle to the end of the game. And then to just give it up like that in the ninth inning was pretty rough. And I thought, that was a pivotal series, I feel like, for Texas. They swept Tech. They had to go on the road and face another tough opponent in Oklahoma State. And I felt like if they would have won that series, that they had themselves in really, really good position going forward for the rest of the year in the Big 12. Overall in this series, I thought the pitching was really good. I thought it was certainly good enough to win. Morehouse did kind of melt down there towards the end. As a matter of fact, I think the run that made it 3-2, I think, was a result of some walks as well. So the bullpen was a little bit shaky in that game 3. But overall, again, I thought the pitching was really good. The offense was just absolute ass. I don't know any other way to describe it. They hit 194 on the weekend. Players that had been really hot, Eric Kennedy, Peyton Powell, did almost nothing in this game, in this series. And the biggest stat, the worst stat, and I knew it was bad. I didn't realize it was this bad. Texas had 32 strikeouts in 3 games up in Stillwater. Just couldn't make contact. Got fooled a lot. Couldn't, and I think it all started with the fastball. And I don't think any of the Oklahoma State guys have just dominant fastball stuff. I mean, I think they were all sitting, low to mid 90s, which is good. I mean, I'm not trying to say these guys didn't have arms. I mean, that's a big league arm, right? But you're playing major Division I baseball. And if you're a team like Texas, you've already played a lot of really good teams. You've seen a bunch of major league arms. But it really started with not being able to catch up to the fastball. And once those guys got behind, they kind of made mincemeat out of them with the off-speed stuff. So, the concern, I think, for Texas, and it's been my concern, and I was kind of willing to put it off. If you listen to the show last week, I said maybe we need to readjust these expectations for this Texas team, because until they came home on this long road trip, and until they swept Tech, and until they were able to go into College Station, beat Texas A&M, I kind of had them pegged for like a 500 team. At least they were closer to a 500 team to me than they were a team that could go make a run in the postseason and possibly, make it to the College World Series again. So I don't know if I jinxed it or kind of let my guard down though, and then they go and do what they did up in Stillwater. I think Oklahoma State's got a pretty decent team. They've got some power on that team in the lineup. And those 2 pitchers, I don't know if they pulled those performances out of their ass or if that's typical for them, but they were both really good. The Sunday starter was pretty good. He didn't go as far, obviously, as the kid on Saturday did, but both really, really controlled the game, their game against Texas. So we move on from that series loss, up in Stillwater to Oklahoma State, and they have a midweek with Air Force. They win that game 7-1 Tuesday night. Powell and Campbell with 2-run home runs. Galvan added a solo home run and an RBI triple. And then Kennedy had a sac fly to score Brown. So 7 runs, 5 of them came via the long ball. 2 of them were manufactured. Whitehead got the start in that game, pitched 4 innings, got the win. He looked pretty good. He wasn't great. I thought it was a good bounce back game. It was the type of game, I mean, the only thing you would have liked to have seen better was just more offense, more efficient offense, I guess. I really struggle and have a problem with the way this team just can't score if it can't hit home runs. Looking ahead to Kansas State series this weekend, Kansas State 19-12 coming in on the season, 5-4 in conference, which is good enough to put them right smack dab in the middle of the Big 12 standings right now. They haven't really played any of the meat of the Big 12 though yet. They had a series against Oklahoma that they swept. And they took 2 of 1, I think, from Baylor. Maybe they were 1. Actually, they were 1-2 against Baylor. Both of those teams are at the bottom of the Big 12 standings. Offensively, they're hitting 269 as a team, 235 in conference. Pitching, they got a 4.75 ERA as a team, 4.67 ERA in conference. So not great numbers, not terrible numbers. Games were supposed to start tonight at 6:30 p.m. on Longhorn Network, and they're supposed to have a Friday night at 6:30 p.m. on Longhorn Network, and then a Saturday at 12 on Longhorn Network because of the Easter weekend. But I think they had some bad weather roll through, at least some weather, maybe not bad weather, but some weather that makes playing baseball impossible, which is interesting because that field is turf. So I guess they do have dirt on the mound. So it must have been enough moisture that they pushed back the game for today, and they're going to play it tomorrow. I haven't seen a time yet for that, but it looks like it's going to be a traditional Friday through Sunday type series. Maybe they'll play a doubleheader on Saturday. I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see if Texas's bats and the bullpen can kind of bounce back from a shaky deal up in Stillwater. Again, when this team is hitting home runs, they score enough to win, and the pitching has always been good enough to win. This team still has not played a game outside of Missouri, and they had a lot of errors in that game. I think there was 3 or 4 errors in the first inning of that game against Missouri. Missouri jumped out to a really big lead really quickly on Texas. But outside of that, they have not yielded a lot of runs, and they haven't been beat by a lot of runs when they do lose games. So I think, you look at this series and you look at the numbers, Texas should sweep this series. It's at home. K-State's been just pretty average, mid, whatever you want to call them, against the weaker competition in the Big 12 so far. They haven't really done anything to say, wow, Kansas State's a contender. Now, one thing I would say, Kansas State, for whatever reason, just gives Texas everything they can get, everything they can handle every single time they play in just about every single sport. I think Texas went up to Kansas State last year and got swept by Kansas State. They definitely lost 2. Well, I won't say definitely. I'm pretty sure they lost for sure at least 2, but I think they actually got swept in that game. A kid from Kansas State hit multiple home runs in that series. I will say, too, that Kansas State probably plays on a smaller field than Texas Tech does. Y'all have heard me talk about Rip Griffin Park and Dan Law Field just being a joke of a baseball stadium, dimension-wise. Tends to lead to a lot of big offensive numbers. So that's my prediction. I'm going to say Texas is going to sweep this series. They're going to get back on track. They're going to find a way to start producing some runs outside of just hitting the ball over the wall. I think the danger to me of being able to hit the ball, like the danger of relying solely on the long ball is, especially when you start talking about postseason, is one loss in the postseason is tough to come back from. It's tough in the regional. It's tough in the super regional. Teams that lose their first round games at the College World Series rarely make it to the finale. And even rarer than that do they win it. You don't want to lose games in the postseason. And the problem with just relying on the long ball is if you have an off day at the plate, or even if the weather is just not conducive to hitting home runs, the wind's blowing in, it's cool, the ball's not traveling well, which you're not going to have that problem out in Omaha. If you make it to Omaha, you're not going to have a problem with coolness for sure. But point being, if you're relying on that long ball and you run into some circumstances where you're just not hitting the long ball, then what do you got? You got nothing. And it's tough on a pitching staff to try to win a game when you can't score. You can't, manufacture at least 2, 3, 4 runs. You look at their wins over the course of the last few games, and they didn't manufacture many runs. A very small percentage of their total over that time were manufactured runs. They were long ball runs. I don't know that counts. But we saw last year, Texas set a record for a Texas team for the amount of home runs they hit last year. And they shattered it. And then they got in the College World Series. They couldn't hit any home runs. And they didn't win a game in the College World Series last year. So state of the team address. Where's the team at right now? I think the pitching, despite some minor hiccups, has still been very good all season. I think it's going to continue to be that way. David Pierce has a lot of arms to choose from. He's finally kind of found what he wants out of his starters. And the other thing is you got Witt sitting there, and we don't know exactly where he's at with his rehab. We don't know if Tanner Witt will pitch at all this year. If he does, we don't know when that'll be. If he comes back and pitches this year, we don't know how good he's going to be. But he's coming back at some point. He's got a lot of talent. That could be a guy that really helps that pitching staff, which again is already really good. I mean, I don't think that Texas will not win something this year because Tanner Witt is hurt. The pitching staff has been great. They got a 3.32 ERA for the team, which is a top 10 in the country. I believe it's got to be like close to top 5. That's really good. Conversely, and I've talked about it multiple times, the offense is bomb or bust. These guys aren't hitting home runs. They're not really doing anything offensively. You got Kennedy and Powell leading the team with batting averages of 336 and 366, but those guys are both hitting 174 in conference. They've really, really struggled since moving into the Big 12 play. Conversely, you got guys like Brown, Campbell, and Guillemette. Brown's been pretty hot all year. Transferred from TCU. He's been pretty good all year. Campbell started off super, super slow. Guillemette kind of started on a tear, hit a lot of doubles, a lot of extra base hits. Then he went a little bit cold, and now he's starting to heat up again. All three of those guys are heating up. Brown's batting .421 in Big 12 play. Campbell .409. Guillemette .368 in Big 12 play. This is the one that kills me, and this is, I think, what got Texas up there in Oklahoma State. Texas has had the bases loaded with no outs twice in the last 5 games and could not score a single run. And it's because they can't make contact at times during games. It's because when they do make contact, they're not making the right contact. They're grounding into double plays. They're not getting the ball in the air and getting it out to the outfield. I don't know what the percentages are. I don't know what the statistics say. But that's got to be like almost impossible. The percentage of you don't score in that situation has to just be really low. And they've done it now twice in the last 5 games. So Texas, that's where I feel like, again, the pitching is there. The offense at times is there. This is a team, I'll tell you this. If this team can get to postseason and get hot with their bats, they're going to be tough to beat. And they're going to have to stay hot, and they're going to have to stay hot through 4 weekends of baseball. 4 weekends and some change in between the last 2 weekends. If they can get hot with the bats, they could absolutely go win the College World Series this year. I don't think they will. I don't think that's very even probable. But that's where they sit today. Really good pitching, potential with the bats. Need more consistency offensively. Need some guys to step up. Guys like Mitchell Daly. I've said his name. I've said his name probably 50 times this year. And it's not been very nice ever that I've said his name. That's a guy that came to Texas, started as a freshman, and every single year he's regressed offensively. He's a guy that's, I think, is playing out of position at shortstop, although he did make some pretty nice plays in that Oklahoma State series. I feel like he's just limited physically. He's a great second baseman. That's what he's played the 2 years prior to being moved over to shortstop this year. He's not like unathletic by any means, but playing shortstop, he doesn't have the arm for it. He doesn't have the range from right to left that a guy like Trey Faltini had. Everything, even when he makes a really good play, it's like, oh, that looked really forced. That didn't look routine. There's not a lot of plays Mitchell Daly makes at shortstop that look routine. But he's got to step it up. Some of the younger guys got to step it up. Flores, Thomas, Ryan Galvan, he's a guy we've talked about some. He's had a lot of pop in his bat the last few games. His average is still pretty low. I think it's in the mid to low 200s, but it's creeping up, and his slugging is really good. When he's hitting the ball, he's getting extra bases. So he's a guy that's been swapping out at catcher with Guillemette, but has mostly been DHing. He's a freshman too. He's a young guy. So that's it for the Texas baseball team. We'll see what they do this weekend. I think the way for them to get on track and get back on track and prove that they're still kind of a contender in the Big 12 is to just go sweep this series against Kansas State. Baseball question of the week. Where are all these people asking me if I want to monetize? People are asking me if I want to monetize my podcast, y'all. Heck yeah, I want to monetize my podcast. I want to get rich. Those are live questions, by the way. For those of you that are listening to the podcast, I also stream live to YouTube and Facebook at the same time that I record my podcast. So baseball question of the week. LSU or the field in the College World Series? Who do you guys got? LSU's been number one all season. They're batting .337 as a team, which is really good. Team ERA 3.51. It's really good. They've lost 4 games this year. They got losses to Iowa, Texas A&M, who at the time was ranked 11th. They've kind of fallen off. And Texas A&M's, I hate to say this, in defense of those Aggies, they have already had to play a series against LSU. They've already had to play a series against Tennessee. They played Texas in between those 2 series. So they had a really rough stretch of really difficult opponents. So they've fallen out of the top 25. I don't know what they did last weekend, but they lost 1 game in a 3-game series against number 5 Arkansas, who's the number 2 rated team in the RPI. And then they lost 1 out of 3 rather, against number 11 Tennessee, who's 19 in the RPI. So at least half of their losses are to really, really good teams. Texas A&M is a team that's had a rough go lately, but they're talented. And I don't know shit about Iowa, so I couldn't tell you. LSU's going on the road this weekend to play South Carolina in Columbia. South Carolina's ranked 6th in the country right now, I believe, doing really well, having a really good season. I'm taking the field. We've seen this before where teams have just run through the regular season. Matter of fact, was it Arkansas last year? It was Arkansas last year or the year before was ranked number 1 almost the entire season. Absolutely killing people. They rolled through the SEC pretty well, as much as one could roll through the SEC in baseball. They didn't even make it out of their own region. So, I think Tennessee did the same thing pretty recently, where they didn't make it out of their own region. Maybe it was Arkansas lost in the Super Regional 2 years ago, and Tennessee lost their region this last season. I can't remember. I know both of those teams had really high expectations and didn't make it out alive. Didn't even make it to the College World Series. So, point being, making it to the final 8 teams in the country is really tough. There's always going to be some teams that maybe didn't play all that great all season, or maybe just flew under the radar all season because of who they played and where they play and what part of the country they're in. They get hot at the end and make things hard on these teams. So if I got to choose LSU or the field to win the College World Series, I'm going to choose the field. If LSU goes and wins that thing, it'll be one of the first times in recent memory I can recall that a team, kind of ran the field, went the entire gamut of the season basically as the number 1 team. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Does LSU have enough to go all the way into the College World Series and win the whole thing? Or are those guys going to get hit by that, I don't know what you call the bug, the reality bug, the Murphy's Law bug? I don't know. Join us next week for another episode of the Bullpen. We're going to talk about the Kansas State series this weekend. We're going to talk about, are the Longhorns a serious Big 12 title and postseason contender in baseball this year, or are they just a pretender? Did they just kind of have a patch of good luck right in the middle of the season? Talk about all that next week. Subscribe to the podcast. Listen to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts. If you don't feel like doing that, you can go to horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com and see all my podcasts all in one spot. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click on the bell to get notifications. You can find me on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook at Horntakes. You can email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com with all your questions, comments, criticisms, and concerns. I love them all. Hook them. You guys have a good weekend.